Hello, and welcome to the Jesus and a Cup of Joe podcast, the show that brings you a conversation about Jesus, the Bible, and life. Here is your host, Royce Bottoms.
Hey, I want to welcome all of you to Jesus and a Cup of Joe. Thank you for joining me today. First, let me start off by saying Happy Easter. I hope and pray each and every one of you are having a blessed Easter day. And so today I want to do my Easter message. This will be for 2023. So I want to just talk about the crucifixion of Jesus. I want to look at Matthew and everything that led up to the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus. I will go ahead and tell you there's going to be a lot of reading out of the Bible, but I believe it's very important to understand fully what's going on. Okay, so when we're looking at what a crucifixion means, crucifixion is a death sentence by nailing or tying someone's hands and feet to a wooden beam and being left there to hang until they die of asphyxiation. The crucifixion that Jesus endured was even more brutal than your typical punishment for criminals. He was given a crown of thorns. He was beaten along the way. He was mocked and humiliated, and sometimes the legs of the criminals would be broken to help speed up the process. But Christ was pierced in his side to determine if he was dead. But his legs were never broken. While the crucifixion is a form of execution, but it's also humiliation that is made by the condemned to be put on display. So when Jesus' death upon the cross, it symbolizes for Christians to take up the cross daily and choose God each day by the power of the Holy Spirit. Crucifixion is also defined as an unjust treatment or persecution that often affects us in our everyday life. Paul significantly stated, "I've been crucified with Christ and I can no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by the faith of the Son of God who loved me, who gave himself for me." Galatians 2:20. And so before we get into everything that Jesus endured, let's talk about who was Jesus. Jesus represented one part of the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. He chose to come upon this earth according to God's great plan to restore and redeem his people who throughout the Old Testament failed to keep the laws due to falling into a sinful nature that was put in place with Adam and Eve when they succumbed to the devil's temptation in the Garden of Eden. He walked in this earth roughly about 33 years, living a sinless life, and was crucified and died and dead, and he was buried and he rose from the dead. And now he sits at the right hand of the Father, where he remains until the day he returns, which the time that only God knows. So the plot to kill Jesus, Matthew 26:1. When Jesus had finished saying all these things, he said to his disciples, "As you know, Passover begins in 2 days, and the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified." And during the same time, the leading priests and elders were meeting in the residence of Caiaphas, the high priest, plotting on how to capture Jesus secretly and kill him. But not during the Passover celebration, they agreed, or the people may riot. So Jesus is in Bethany. He's at the home, I do believe, of Lazarus. This is meanwhile Jesus was in Bethany at the home of Simon, the man who had previously had leprosy. I'm sorry, I thought it was Lazarus. I apologize. Simon. While he was eating, a woman came with beautiful alabaster jar of expensive perfume and poured it over his head. And the disciples was upset when they saw this. "What a waste," they said. "We could have sold this for a higher price and given the money to the poor." But Jesus said to them, aware of this, he replied, "Why criticize this woman for doing such a great thing? You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. She has poured this perfume on me to prepare my body for funeral. I tell you the truth, wherever the good news is preached throughout the world, this woman's deeds will be remembered and discussed." And so, right off the bat, we have the plot to kill Jesus. Plus, Jesus knows now, don't mistake this. Jesus knows what's happening to him. He knows what needs to be done. He knows his time is coming. He knew it when he entered Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. He knew what all was going to be taking place over the week. And so the elders are out to kill him, to crucify him, to secretly take him off and do something, but they know that it is Passover celebration, and they agree not to do this to where people may riot. And so now this is where Judas goes and betrays Jesus. Then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12 disciples, went to the leading priests and asked, "How much will you pay me to betray Jesus to you?" And they gave him 30 pieces of silver. And from that time on, Judas began looking for an opportunity to betray Jesus. Verse 17, on the first day of the festival of the unleavened bread, the disciples all came to Jesus and asked, "Where do you want us to prepare the Passover meal for you?" "As you go into the city," he told them, "you will see a certain man and tell them, the teacher says, my time has come, and I will eat the Passover meal with my disciples at your house." So the disciples did exactly what Jesus told them and prepared the Passover meal. And when it was evening, Jesus sat down at the table with the 12. And while he was eating, he says, "I tell you the truth, one of you will betray me." Greatly distressed, each of them turned and asked, Am I the one, Lord?" And he replied, "The one who has just eaten from this bowl will betray me. For the Son of Man must die, as the scriptures declared long ago. But how terrible it will be for the ones who betray him. It would be far better for that man to never be born." And Judas was the one that betrayed him, and also asked, "Rabbi, am I the one?" And Jesus said to him, "You have said it." And while they're eating, Jesus took some bread and blessed it and broke it into pieces and gave it to the disciples, says, "Take this and eat, for this is my body." And then he took a cup of wine and he gave thanks to God for it, and he gave it to them and says, "Each of you drink from this, for this is my blood, which confirms the covenant between God and his people. It is poured out as a sacrifice to forgive the sins of many. Mark my words, I will not drink wine again until the day I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom." And then they sang hymns, and they went out to the Mount of Olives. So Jesus is already, the Passover's done. They're having their meal. Judas has already done what he needed to do. This is all according to what Jesus knows is happening. He is being betrayed. He was betrayed for 30 pieces of silver. And now, he is telling them, this is what's going on. And this is where we get communion from. When Jesus breaks the bread and he says, "This is my body. Eat this. This is my body. It's been broken for you. And take a drink of this wine, because this is my blood. And this is the covenant between God and his people. And it's been poured out." And so he's preparing them, and he's trying to get them to understand what all is taking place. And so when we look at verse 31, this is when Jesus predicts Peter's denial. And on the way, Jesus told him, "Tonight, all of you will desert me, for the scriptures say, God will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will scatter. But after I've been raised from the dead, I will go ahead of you to Galilee and meet you there." Peter declared, "Even if everyone deserts you, I will never desert you." And Jesus replied, "I tell you the truth, Peter. For this very night before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times that you even know me." And of course, Peter says, "No, even if I have to die with you, I will never deny you." And the other disciples vowed the same thing. But see, Jesus knew. And something that I find fascinating about Peter, and I've shared this before when I discussed the 12 disciples in a previous episode. Peter's one of my favorite, for the simple fact was, here is Peter, who honestly, and please understand, I'm not trying to offend nobody, but this guy went through hell and back, if you look at it, because just reading him, watching him with Jesus on those 3 years of Jesus' ministry, you could see Peter turning into a great apostle, a great disciple who's going to do great things. Now, this is his hiccup. This is the one time where he stumbles because Jesus told him, says, you're going to deny me 3 times before the rooster crows. And this was his stumbling block. But I'm telling you, Peter gets it together and he goes after it big time, especially in the book of Acts. So if you haven't had an opportunity to read, definitely go into the book of Acts and read about Peter and how he takes everything that's happened and the Lord really blesses him and he takes off and his ministry is fantastic. So when Jesus goes and he prays in the Garden of Gethsemane, it says, then Jesus went to the olive grove, which is called Gethsemane, and he said, sit here for a while. I'm going to go over there and pray. And he took Peter and Zebedee's 2 sons, James and John, and he became anguish and distress. And he told them, my soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. And he went on a little further and he bowed down his face to the ground praying, Father, if it's possible, let this cup of suffering pass over me. But yet I want your will to be done and not mine. And when he returned to the disciples, he found them asleep. And he said to Peter, you couldn't even watch for me 1 hour. Keep watch and pray so that you will not give in to temptation. For the spirit is willing, but the body is weak. And that's something I've shared with a lot of people, is the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. We are always being attacked. And I believe that these 3 men knew that they needed to stay awake, but the enemy made them tired, made them drowsy. And as Jesus says, you couldn't even watch with me even 1 hour. And so then Jesus left for the second time. He prayed. He said, Father, this cup cannot be taken away unless I drink it, and your will be done. And he returned to them and he found them sleeping again, and they couldn't keep their eyes open. So he went and prayed a 3rd time, saying the same thing. And then he came to the disciples. He says, go ahead and sleep. Have your rest. But look, the time has come. The Son of Man is betrayed to the hands of sinners. Up, let's get going. Look, my betrayer is here. And so he's in the garden, and now Judas has found him with the guards, and he's being betrayed. And he's being betrayed and he's going to be arrested because it says, even as Jesus said this, Judas, one of the 12 disciples, arrived in the crowd of men with swords and clubs they have sent by the leading priest and the elder people. The traitor Judas had given them a prearranged signal. You will know the man to arrest when I greet him with a kiss. And Judas came straight to Jesus, greeting him, greetings, Rabbi, and he gave him a kiss. And Jesus said, my friend, go ahead and do what you've come to do. And then the others grabbed Jesus to arrest him. And one of the men with Jesus pulled out a sword and struck the priest's slave by slashing off his ears. And Jesus said, put away the sword, for whoever uses the sword will die from the sword. Don't you realize that I could have asked my Father for 1,000 angels to protect us, and he would have sent them immediately? But if I did, how would the scriptures be fulfilled and describe what must happen now? And then Jesus said to the crowd, I am some dangerous revolutionary that you come with swords and clubs to arrest me. Why didn't you arrest me in the temple? I was there teaching every day. But this has all happened to fulfill the words of the prophet recorded by scriptures. And at this point, the disciples deserted him and fled. So Jesus is now arrested and he's fulfilling the scriptures. And I don't know if you've captured and understood what I've been reading, but he says that this is how the scriptures be fulfilled to describe what must happen now. And see, he was been telling them all along that the Son of Man is going to be betrayed. He is going to die. He is going to be crucified because that's what the scripture said. And so now Jesus is in front of the council, and he says, when the people who arrested Jesus led him to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the teachers of the religious law and the elders gathered. Meanwhile, Peter followed in a distance and came to the high priest's courtyard. he went in and he sat with the guards and waited to see what all would happen. And inside, the leading priest entered the high council, and they were trying to find witnesses who would lie about Jesus so they could put him to death. But they could not find anyone to agree to give false witnesses about Jesus. And so they couldn't use any of the testimonies. Finally, 2 men came forward and declared that a man said, "I will destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days." And the high priest stood up and said to Jesus, "Well, aren't you going to answer to these charges? What do you have to say for yourself?" And Jesus remained silent. And even the high priest said to him, "I demand in the name of the living God to tell us that you're the Messiah, the Son of God." And Jesus replied, "You have said it. In the future, you will see the Son of Man sitting in the place of power at the right hand of God, coming in the clouds of heaven." And then the high priest tore his clothing to show that he was in horror, blaspheming. "Why do we need any other witnesses? You've heard the blasphemer. What is your verdict?" "Guilty," they shouted. "He deserves to die," they said. And as they began to spit in Jesus' face and beat him with their fists, some slapped him. The prophecy to us, Messiah, who hit you at that time. So meanwhile, Peter is now outside in the courtyard where a servant girl came to him and says, "Aren't you one of those with Jesus of the Galilean?" And Peter denied it in front of everybody. "I do not know what you're talking about." And later outside the gate, another servant girl noticed him and says, "This man is with Jesus of Nazareth." And Peter denied, this time with an oath. "I don't even know this man," he says. And a little later, a bystander came over and says, "You must be one of them. We could tell by your Galilean accent." And Peter swore, "A curse on me if I'm lying. I do not know this man." Immediately the rooster crowed. And suddenly Jesus' words flashed through Peter's mind. "Before the roosters crow, you will deny me 3 times that you even know me." And he went away weeping bitterly. So during this time, the very early morning, the leading priests and the elders have met again. They're laying out a plan to put Jesus to death. They've bound him up. They've taken him away. They've taken him to Pilate's house, which is the Roman governor. When Judas, who had betrayed him, realized that Jesus had been condemned to die, he was filled with remorse. And he took the 30 pieces of silver back to the priest. And he says, "I have sinned." And he declared, "I have betrayed an innocent man." "What do they care?" they retorted. "What is your problem?" Then Judas threw the coins down at the temple, and he went out and he hung himself. And then the priest picked up the coins and said it wouldn't be right to put this money back in the treasury since it was a payment for murder. And after some discuss, they finally went and bought a potter's field and made it a cemetery for foreigners. This is the field that they call the field of blood, which is fulfilled in the prophecy of Jeremiah, saying, "They took 30 pieces of silver, the price of which he valued the people of Israel, and purchased a potter's field as the Lord directed." So Jesus is now in front of Pilate. Jesus is now standing in front of Pilate, the Roman governor. "Are you the king of Jews?" the governor asked. Jesus replies, "You've said it." But when the leading priests and the elders made their accusations against him, Jesus remained silent. "Don't you hear these charges that they're bringing against you?" Pilate demanded. But Jesus had no response for any of these charges, much to the governor's surprise. And so now it's the governor's custom each year during Passover to release one prisoner to the crowd that anyone wanted. This was a year that the notorious prisoner by the name of Barabbas was to be released or to be put up. And as the crowd gathered before Pilate's house that morning, he asked them, "Which one of you do you want me to release, Barabbas or Jesus, the one they call the Messiah?" He knew very well that the religious leaders had arrested Jesus out of envy. But then Pilate was sitting there on the judgment seat, and his wife sent him a message, "Leave the innocent man alone. I've suffered through a terrible nightmare about him last night." Meanwhile, the priest and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas to be released and to put Jesus to death. And so the governor asked again, "Which one of these two do you want me to release?" And the crowd shouted back, "Barabbas." And Pilate responded, "Then what should I do with Jesus, who you call the Messiah?" They shouted back, "Crucify him." Why? Pilate demanded. What crime has he committed? And the mob grew even louder, hollering, "Crucify him." And Pilate saw that this wasn't getting anywhere and the riots were developing, so he sent out for a bowl of water and he washed his hands before the crowd. "I'm innocent of this man's blood. The responsibility is yours." And all the people yell back, "We will take responsibility for his death, and we and our children." And Pilate released Barabbas to them and ordered Jesus flogged with the tip of a whip and then turned over to Roman soldiers to be crucified. So Barabbas, a murderer, someone that they knew was bad for the community, was being released because the elders and the priests were persuading the crowd. And I do believe, and I have to believe, that the devil himself was walking in the middle of the crowd, whispering in ears that day. Because see, I believe the devil thought that he could win the final war against God by putting the Son of God down once and for all. But see, what the devil failed to realize is the victory was already Jesus's, that the devil had already lost. So when we look at the soldiers who are mocking Jesus, some of the governor's soldiers took Jesus to their headquarters and they called out their entire regiment and they stripped him and they put a scarlet robe on him and they wove thorns of branches into a crown and put it on his head and placed a reed stick in his right hand as a scepter. And then they knelt before him, mocking him and taunting him, "Hail to the King of Jews." And they spit on him and they grabbed the stick and they struck him with it in the head. And when they finally was tired of mocking him, they took the robe off and put his clothes on him again, and they led him away to be crucified. Along the way, they came across a man by the name of Simon who was from Cyrene. A soldier forced him to carry Jesus' cross. And he went out to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of skulls, where the soldiers gave Jesus wine mixed with a bitter gall, which when he tasted it, he refused to drink. And then they nailed him to a cross, and the soldiers gambled for his clothes by throwing dice. And when they sat around, they kept guards as he hung there. And the sign was fastened above Jesus' head, announcing the charge of him. And it read, "This is Jesus, the King of Jews." And two other criminals who were being crucified with him was one on the right and one on the left. And the people who were passing by was shouting abusive and shaking their heads in mockery. "Look at you now," they were yelling at him. "You said you were going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. Well then, if you're the Son of God, save yourself and come down from the cross." The leading priests and the teachers of the religious laws and the elders also mocked Jesus. "He saved others," they scoffed, "but he can't even save himself. So he's the King of Israel, is he? Let him come down off the cross right now and we'll believe him. He trusted God, so let God rescue him now if he wants. For he said, 'I am the Son of God.'" And even the criminals who were crucified with him ridiculed him in the same way. So around noon, darkness fell on the entire land until 3 o'clock. And about 3 o'clock, Jesus called out in a loud voice, my God, why have you abandoned me?" And some of the bystanders misunderstood and thought he was calling for the prophet Elijah. And one of them ran and filled a sponge with sour wine and held it up on the reed stick for him to drink. But the rest said, "Wait, let's see whether if Elijah will come and save him." And Jesus shouted again and released his spirit. And at that moment, the curtains of the sanctuary of the temple was torn from top to bottom. The earth shook and the rocks split apart. The tombs opened and the bodies of godly men and women who had been dead were raised from the dead. They left the cemeteries after Jesus' resurrection. And they went into the holy city of Jerusalem, where he appeared to many people. The Roman officer and the other soldiers at the crucifixion were terrified by the earthquake that had all happened. And they said, "This truly was the Son of God." Many women who had come from Galilee with Jesus to take care of him watched from a distance. Among them was Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of James and John, the sons of Zebedee. And as evening approached, Joseph, a rich man from Arimathea, who had been a follower of Jesus, went to Pilate and asked for his body, and Pilate issued an order to release him. And Joseph took his body and wrapped it with long sheets of clean linen, and he placed it in his own brand new tomb, which he had carved out of the rock. And they rolled a great stone in front of the entrance. And both Mary Magdalene and Mary were sitting across from the tomb and watching. So the next day was Sabbath. The leading priests and Pharisees went to see Pilate. And they said to him, "Sir, if you remember what the deceiver once said, that he was still alive and after 3 days he would rise from the dead. So we request you to seal the tomb until the third day. This will prevent his disciples from coming and stealing his body and then telling everyone he raised from the dead. And if it happens, it would be worse off than at first." And Pilate replied, "Take guards and secure it the best you can." So they sealed the tomb and posted guards to protect it. So, to recap where we're at, and I know this has been a little lengthy, and I'm thanking you guys for holding in there, but Jesus comes into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. He is basically attacked to the point of having false claims put against him. Here it is, Good Friday. He is being sent to the cross. He is crucified. Everyone thinks it's over, and they're placing guards around the tomb because they don't want nobody to steal it, and it's all done. But early Sunday morning, as a new day was dawning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went out to visit the tomb, and suddenly there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven and rolled aside the stone and sat on it. His face was like lightning, and his clothes was white as snow, and the guards shook with fear for what they have saw, and they fell into a deep faint. And the angel of the Lord spoke to the woman, "Do not be afraid," he says. "I know who you're looking for, Jesus, who was crucified. He isn't here. He is risen from the dead, just as he said would happen. Come and see where his body was laying. Now go quickly and tell the disciples that he risen from the dead, and he's going ahead of you to Galilee. And you will see him there, and remember what I have told you." And the women ran quickly from the tomb, where they were very frightened, and they were also filled with great joy, and they rushed to the disciples to deliver the angel's message. And as they went, Jesus met them and greeted them, and they ran to him and grasped his feet and worshiped him. And Jesus said to him, "Do not be afraid. Go tell my brothers to leave for Galilee, and I will meet them there." So, right now, I'm going to stop right there on Matthew 28 with verse 10. Like I said, I know that's a lot of reading, but that tells you about the resurrection. That tells you the whole reason for Easter. The whole reason for Easter is not about the Easter bunny, and it's not about chocolate. It's not about all of that. The reason that we celebrate Easter as Christians is because the resurrection of our Lord and Savior Jesus, and the fact that he beat death, hell, and the grave, and he sits at the right hand of the Father today, and he makes a way for you and I. And so as I celebrate my 23rd year this Easter in the Lord's ministry, I get excited every Easter because it's the fact of sharing the good news and the gospel of Jesus Christ, and how this man came to the earth to die for you and I. He came and he put himself on that cross. No one put him on that cross. He put himself on there. And I do believe he could have called legions and legions of angels to protect him, not only in the Garden of Gethsemane, but on that cross, and that never would have happened. But he needed to fulfill this. He needed to correct what was wrong with the sin that was in people's life. He knew that he was the only price that could be paid to take care of the sin. Because in Romans, they tell us the wages of sin is death. But with Jesus, he paid the price. So, as we get ready to wrap up, I just want you to know that we're in a great time today. Even though the world is full of chaos, we have a loving, all-knowing, all-powerful, all-mercy, all-encompassing Lord that we serve. And we are celebrating his life. And so I believe it's very important for us to go out and tell this world about this man named Jesus, and to share the good news. To share the good news. That is very important to do. So, once again, thank you so much. I know this was a little lengthy today, but I wanted to read out of the scriptures with Matthew, because I think it's very important to show the illustration of everything that led up to Jesus defeating hell, death, and the grave. And I hope and pray you have a fantastic Easter, and may God bless each and every one of you. And if you would, take a look at our website, Jesus and a Cup of Joe, and look at us and follow us on our social media of Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. I am asking for donations, and I've set up a GoFundMe page, and I'm looking for sponsorship and advertisers, as we have an opportunity presented to us to take the podcast to a radio station here in the Georgia area to reach more people in the world and share the gospel. So if you feel the need to give, please do. And thank you so much. And as I get ready to get out of here, it's real simple. You always start your day with Jesus and a Cup of Joe. God bless.
Hey, this is Royce from Jesus and a Cup of Joe. Are you in the market trying to find a great gift and not sure what to do? Why don't you check out my friends at Artisans Woodwork 73. They are your one-stop shop for all of your wood needs. They do handmade cutting boards, cheese boards, stovetop covers, you name it, he can make it. So why don't you check them out, artisanswoodwork73.com. And if you use the promo code #Jesus and a Cup of Joe, you can get up to 10% off your order.